Hey, happy Wednesday, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jory Myers, owner of Atlanta Dispatch, and I'm very excited to have our guest on stage right now. It's been a long while coming. We were supposed to have this conversation a few weeks ago, but definitely happy to have you on, Lauren. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can. We can
All
definitely
right.
hear you.
Happy to be here. Thanks, Jory. I'm so excited to be here. My first real foray Clubhouse experience.
Well, we pray that it's going to be one to remember for good things and that
good reasons.
Right. And that, a lot of people get to learn about you and they can use you as a resource in the future. So without further ado, do you mind giving, just a brief background of who you are? And the reason why I'm asking this is because you've done a lot when it comes to maritime and maritime law. I mean, we're going to talk about it, but just, Lauren, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much for having me on. So I am a maritime attorney. By practice, by trade. I'm from Michigan originally, so got into maritime incident or maybe I guess on upbringing, the Great Lakes state. So I was sailing with my dad out on the lakes and thought it was pretty cool. I went to Hope College and was doing the whole political science. I don't know if I want to go to DC. Was always kind of I don't know. I never really loved law, but something was driving me toward kind of like the law career. It was going to give me more options. So found this law school out in Rhode Island called Roger Williams University School of Law. And they had a joint degree program with a master's of marine affairs. So I thought, well, that sounds cool. That has maritime written all over it. And at the time, I was a senior at Hope College and I was on the sail team. And so I was just focused on sailing and how I can incorporate that into my future career. So went out to Roger Williams, found my way through a whole bunch of classes, law of the sea, which is a kind of the international oceans area, and really kind of loved shipping and ocean transit. So, found my way down to DC despite my best efforts, found my way down there, and started working for, I took a contract job over at the State Department for a little bit doing, Arctic law and kind of extended continental shelf mapping and, the project that they had for that, which was really cool, kind of, mapping of the Arctic and the whole planting of the Russian flag and all that. But then, I really found this position over at the Federal Maritime Commission. It was the International Affairs Attorney in the General Counsel's office. And I was like, now that sounds cool. So I went and worked there for a while, had a great time, was just, DC's a fun town to be young in, but also working for the federal government is a really great opportunity to just dive in fully. You're like fully diving in and learning everything there is to learn and given responsibility, real right away. So, it was so fun. I was able to work with some really great international partners and sit in on some really high level maritime negotiations. And, I was our maritime technical expert for the international side of things for the FMC when our politicals didn't want to or couldn't go or whatever. I was kind of the lead. I was the constant on the international front. So really cool experience. Really got to see a lot. But for family reasons, I wanted to move back up to New England. I'd gone to school out here, so my now husband, his whole family's up here. So I thought, cool, let's go up there. Was really fortunate to get a job at the Port of Boston. And what a great experience that I had was being able to be in DC and having this kind of helicopter upbringing of overview of the whole industry, and then going up to Boston and really getting boots on the docks. And I kind of say, like, I probably did it backwards. I definitely should have had the experience of boots on the docks before I went into like the regulating the industry. But for me personally, it was a great way of really kind of gut checking and learning, like, okay, so I know all these terms, I know all these regulations, but like, what does that look like on the user experience? And so working at the port was perfect for that because, I got to go down to the docks and be like, okay, this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like for a crane to take a container off of a container ship here. or what does a cruise ship look like when it pulls alongside? You know, like all of those things that are just, I mean, they're just so huge, you know? So, and I don't know if it's coming through, but I have a passion for maritime. So I just thought it was so cool to see, you know, if I was sitting at a desk, it was a bad day. If I was down at the docks and I was looking and observing and watching, that was like the best day of my life.
Nice. And how often did you get those days to, you know, be out there, be out?
You know, I mean, I would carve it out. Like if it meant that I was taking my lunch break and I was going to go over and watch that ship come in, I was doing it, you know, so I was trying to get down over to the dock. I mean, it was only a mile, half a mile, not even quarter mile down the way. So whether I was walking, driving my car, you know, whatever it was, I was getting down there. But it was so fun. But, you know, COVID happened. Everybody kind of got sent home, and you know, I miss the national conversation. I really liked, you know, being at the docks and being able to see everything, but I missed that national conversation that I was formerly part of. And, you know, as the struggles with the supply chain started to really grow, and, you know, everybody kind of found their way, everybody was kind of part of the global COVID reshuffle. And so I was part of that too. And, you know, so I started my own law firm. I started my own legal consulting company. At first, it felt almost too official to call it a law firm. I mean, that's what it is. So I started Squall Strategies. So it became, you know, kind of a way of re-engaging in the national and actually in the international conversation of ocean shipping and answering questions that had to do with the Federal Maritime Commission, which is where I had worked, and really the regulatory body over the ocean industry. And so, you know, I thought that was so cool. And so, you know, that's been open for about a year now. It's been really fun just, you know, getting to dive into questions that people have, legal questions that people have about either their business or their shipping construct, or can they do this, or do they need that license, or what's going on with all these rulemakings. But, you know, I was finding that not everybody has a legal question. And so, you know, I am a maritime attorney, but that's, you know, I can also kind of talk about the industry generally. So I created a second company because I was like, you know, not everything's legal. So the second company is the Maritime Professor. And really, that's the non-legal discussion side of things. That's where I host on Fridays at 1 p.m. I host a LinkedIn Live or a live stream called By Land and by Sea, an attorney breaking down the week in supply chain. And what I do is exactly that. You know, I try to break down the supply chain with the top news stories. I go over the top 3 stories of the week, and then I do about 20 minutes where I just kind of cover a random topic that I thought people might want to know a little bit more about. I've had a lot of experience in this world, so I thought in this kind of maritime world, so I thought, you know, why not just start sharing some of that? So That's what I've been doing, and I'm building e-learning content, so there's going to be courses available. Make sure to sign up for my email list so you know. I'm going to do a 101, the essential guide to ocean shipping. And, you know, just people are curious about it. And it's important to break down the silos between surface transport and ocean transport. So I am so sorry that was very long-winded, but that's a little snapshot of me.
No, it's so seamless. You know, I'm very happy that you were able to share and incorporate all the things that you got going on right now. You said a lot of great things that I definitely wanted to come back and, you know, talk a little bit more about. But, you know, it's really, you said that you are passionate about maritime, and I can definitely tell it's coming out in the way that you're speaking. But, you know, even in just your history, you said that you grew up right next to Lake Michigan. So you had an opportunity to always be out on the water, and you joined the sail team in college. What does that look like? You know?
I mean, you know, it was a club sport, but, you know, so as I was going through college, and, you know, you go home hours. I'm from Traverse City originally, so that's kind of a resort town anyways, and kind of a, you know, during the time you're like, it's such a boring town, and then when you leave it, you're like, I wish I lived there still, you know. But it was right on the water, and so I actually worked for a party catamaran. That was my summer job.
Wow.
It was so fun, and like because I had worked, you know, because I was sailing on the sail team, these were small boats. You know, this was a big catamaran. I mean, it's what was it, 46-foot catamaran with a 32-foot beam. I used to know all the stats. It was called the Naughty Cat, Naughty Cat, Nauti. You know, a little tongue in cheek. It was kind of fun. And it was, you know, it was actually where I got my experience. So not only sailing with my dad, sailing in the sail team, sailing for the Naughty Cat, I was able to get enough experience on water that then I was able to get my captain's license.
Right.
So this is kind of a little street cred in the maritime world. I haven't sailed the open ocean necessarily with it, but I have sailed quite a few kind of, we might rent a boat here and there, but I feel like it gives me a little street cred to say, like, I know what I'm talking about because I've kind of been in it, and not only do I know it theoretically, but like, I know the grit that it takes to sail a boat, and, stuff goes wrong real quick. And I think that you find that probably with the over the road truckers too.
That's exactly what I just thought about.
Right? You're in the middle of nowhere and like there's nobody to call. You just have to fix it. So like the gumption that you get from that moment, from that experience, it really sticks with you. And I think that's why over the road truckers, I think that's why surface transport people are so passionate. I think that's why maritime people are so passionate, because like there's this level of like won't quit, like you just got to do it.
You just got to do it. You just got to do it. The job has to get done. So who's going to do it? You. You're going to pull your weight on the team and you're going to get it done. But you saying that you're a captain, that definitely inspired the name of this room, or at least the flyer rather, aye, Captain, my captain, because I thought it was awesome. That is some extreme street cred for you to be a captain and working as a maritime lawyer and, professor. So, no, that's...
it's a theme, right? You got to stick to the theme.
Right. No doubt about it.
Now, if I just kind of figured if you like the subject matter, if you like the content, if you kind of go into the industry that you already have a passion for, there's that whole adage of like, if you like what you do, you never work a day in your life. I mean, look, I've worked some days in my life, but like, it's pretty fun to like, just like I said, just get to talk about boats all day in some form or fashion.
Right. And you said something earlier where, just speaking that jargon, you might have just rolled it off your tongue, but because a lot of the folks in here are from the trucking world, what is FMC? What is that? Let's talk about that.
So sorry. Yeah. So the Federal Maritime Commission, I'm so sorry. So I worked there. The Federal Maritime Commission, it is the independent regulatory body of ocean shipping. So essentially, their mission essentially is for the benefit of the movement of goods, the fair and efficient movement of goods for the U.S. consumer, importer, and exporter. So essentially, there's plenty of agencies that kind of, regulate the internal, the land side, the domestic. But this one regulates those vessels coming to our shores. And so, they're not like an international policeman. But if you want to do business on our shores, if you want to be bringing those goods in and out, you gotta know who the FMC is. So that's their role. They're regulating the pricing. They're regulating the alliances that we've heard so much about, which is kind of so ocean carriers. So there's all the different companies that are out there. There's Maersk, there's MSC, there's Costco. You've probably heard of some of those.
Right. So do you have any favorites?
Well, I don't know if I have favorites. But I think that they're all good and bad. There's good and bad to all. I don't think that they're as evil as some people purport, but I also don't think their hands are totally clean.
Right. We're going to talk about that.
Right. Like there's some shady stuff going on, but are they all doing it? I don't know. But yeah, so they're all kind of packing up, right? So that's the alliances. And so the FMC is responsible for watching and maintaining that they don't become monopolistic. That's a very contentious thing that I think we'll probably talk about in a little bit, but like the alliance formation. So there's actually 3 different alliances, and within there, all 3 of these alliances make up 80% of the market share, but each alliance in itself is only about 20 to 30% of the alliance share. So, or of the market share. So, really that they are competitive. But I don't know. It's one of those, it's a contentious thing.
Okay. So look, one of those things that I just wanted to go ahead and jump into real quick, since you did bring up the alliances and, the market and, possibly a monopolistic approach in output. So what was going on last year? Probably still out there when those steamships were just like, soaring those prices on shipping containers. I know that there was a premium and there was a huge demand on things, but, didn't it kind of get to more of a monopolistic approach with the way they were setting prices?
Yeah. So, this is where it gets kind of tough. So, all right. So we got the alliances and let's break them down. So we have 3 different alliances. We got a 2M alliance, which is Maersk and the Mediterranean Shipping Company, or MSC. We got the alliance, or THE alliance, which is Hapag-Lloyd, One, which is One Ocean Network Express. Those are the pink ships. I think that's so cool that they're all hot.
Yeah, I like them.
Yeah, right. I mean, like what a non-typical color for a mundane thing. But,
Right.
and that, so, okay. So the Alliance, we got Hapag, we got One, we got Hyundai Merchant Marine, we got Yang Ming. And then Ocean Alliance is the third one. So that's Costco, that's CMA, CGM, and that's Evergreen Line. So, there's a lot of things that was happening right when COVID hit. So one, everybody got really freaked out. So they kind of bought everything. And then everybody was kind of sitting at home. So people thought, okay, it was going to drop off. There was going to be uncertainty in the market. There was going to be uncertainty in everybody getting fired. You staying home. Like, how's it going to work? Is there going to be discretionary spending? Turns out people were bored and online shopping is a real thing. I mean, oversimplification, obviously, but like there was a lot of online shopping happening when everybody was stuck at home. And that was, I think, the X factor that nobody really knew. And so not the only reason, but like all of a sudden you went from slowing things down, trying to manage so that we didn't get into this world of like too much capacity to now, holy cow, overnight you had zero capacity and these ships were filled up and you couldn't bring stuff fast enough. And add in that you were trying to get PPE in the door. So, we were trying to get masks, we were trying to get all this hospital equipment, and that was competing at the same time with all these people making these orders. And so that's what was, all that was contributing to the just increased demand. I mean, it's supply and demand. It's basic econ. I'm not an economist, but like, I guess I can kind of understand that. So things were starting to rise, You also had labor shortages because of platooning. So like, you had team A, team B, team C. And if team B went down, with somebody got COVID at the beginning, remember, like if you even had a hint of COVID, everybody kind of shut down just to keep everybody safe. So like now you're only working partial teams on the yard. And so it's probably moving a little bit slower than it would have otherwise. So now you have increased demand, increased cargo movement, but you have less people there to move it. So that kind of contributed to it. And then as you're kind of kicking the can down this supply chain road, you're getting the drayage drivers coming to pick it up. And so appointments were filling up. And then you're getting the warehouses that are, over capacity. They are just bursting at the seams with all this goods. So then if you can't put it in the warehouse, if you can't take it out of the box, then the box sits full. And then that's a troublesome spot because you need that box for the exports. You need that box for agriculture, U.S. agriculture to be sent back out. So that we can kind of balance the trade. So, that it all just started to compile on each other. And so as the supply chain generally got more just stressed, of course the prices were going to go up, and so nobody was more surprised about these billion-dollar profits than the ocean carriers themselves, because prior to COVID, they were lucky to break even. And that is insane to think that they were lucky to make $100 in a year. Some of the time they'd lose money in a year, and so part of why alliances were created wasn't just to team up and try to take over the market and be these cartels. They're not allowed to talk about rates. They're only allowed to talk about, they're not allowed to talk about rates. They can talk about vessel sharing and operational sharing and some sort of like things that are associated with kind of a better experience for the shipper, which, I think probably a lot of your listeners are probably laughing right now being like, what is she talking about? Better experience for the shipper? Everybody's having such a terrible experience right now, or not everybody, but it's pretty tough out there. But the whole idea was if you get these ocean carriers kind of sharing their vessels similar to airlines, if you get these people sharing their vessels so that way, if you need, airlines is a great example. You're going from Chicago down to Fort Worth and you need to get there and you want to go there direct. But the airline that you want to take, Southwest, stops over in Memphis first. I don't want to go to Memphis. So you kind of look around. United, all right, maybe they're part of like an alliance. Were they part of Star Alliance or whatever? So now you can go direct. You might not be on United the whole way. You might not actually be on United, but you book through United. You don't actually care who owns that plane that you're on. That's kind of the same idea that what was happening with the vessels coming together and with the ocean alliances. They were trying to make it a little more seamless for the customer, for the shipper, to be able to ship their goods from point A to point B, from the warehouse to the U.S. soil.
And with that, not to disrupt, there's a term for that, what you're describing, where the goods might go onto another vessel that might carry in the, towards the same goal, but it might not be that same original company or that original steamship. What's that term? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I mean, so on an airline, it's called code sharing. On a vessel, it's vessel sharing. It's alliance. I'm not exactly sure if that's what you're looking for, but
it's something simple. It is something simple. It's just something that I know that is definitely something that some of the big, steamship carriers, they talk about on their websites of whether they, if it is something that they actually do or something that they're against. But it's definitely something that's standard in the industry that is well known.
It might be VSA, so vessel sharing agreements, VSAs.
Okay, let's go with that for right now. And if it pops to me the exact jargon, I'm going to throw it out there.
Perfect. But I mean, so it's kind of funny to look at the history of like the alliance creation, because what they are today was not what they were contemplated to be. Or, like when they wanted to get together, it was to try to make it easier. And now everybody's, you benefit from the low prices. They were able to keep their prices low because they could diversify, and, they didn't have to take a million different routes. They didn't have 5 different groups doing the same route. But there's still, there's still 3 different alliances. They're still competing with each other. And at the time, it was because they weren't really making any money, they could be going bankrupt. And so we saw that with one of the carriers going bankrupt. And it was kind of like,
which carrier?
Nope. It was the Korean carrier.
Don't get me the line, okay? Okay, I don't mean to put you on the spot. It's okay. The whole point was I was going to see if it was a household name.
Hanjin. It is household.
Oh, okay.
Hanjin went bankrupt. I saw
right.
Hyundai, and I just had that.
I definitely remember seeing those containers in all the different movies back in the day.
Right. So Hanjin went bankrupt, and it was kind of unheard of that they went bankrupt. And, but part of the idea of everybody kind of forming together in an alliance was like, well, maybe we won't go bankrupt, because maybe if something happens, we can kind of, like I said, it's not a money sharing thing. It wasn't a rate sharing thing. It was just an operational way so that they could kind of share the operational routes and share that and make it a better experience for the shipper.
Right. Okay. And, you brought up, or at least you listed out a couple of the steamships that was on, I guess it was the last alliance, but you said Costco, and then you mentioned one that was, I believe, based out of Europe. Actually, 2 based out of Europe. What was the one? Who are the other steamship carriers with Costco?
Yes, so Costco CMA CGM. That's a French company,
right?
And then Evergreen.
Where is Evergreen? I don't know.
Evergreen is.
I'm basically trying to get to how do they hook up? Like how do they choose? Who's going to be on the team?
Yeah, so they kind of reshuffle. They can reshuffle. They've reshuffled through the years for sure. I mean, I'd like to think that they're reshuffling to make sure that they don't take too much market share. I don't know if that's exactly true. I think that they've kind of reshuffled as companies have formed and disformed. So the pink ships. That was actually the combination of 3 Japanese carriers. So it was K-Line and, who else?
I've seen them.
Yeah. Yep. So, so it's kind of like, they kind of, it's as the industry is kind of shifting around, so is so it was Nippon, it was K-Line, and it was Mitsui OSK. Those were the 3. So, so that's one. So when one turned into, when the Ocean Network Express turned into that company, maybe that necessitated a little shifting of the alliances there too.
Okay.
They don't work in cahoots with each other necessarily. Well, not necessarily. They don't work in cahoots with each other, because then that would be monopolistic. And, the FMC, that's their job, is to make sure that they're watching this. And so they've come out with some recommendations recently, and they've been, they're concerned about this. They're not just a sleepy agency. They want to be there. They're not super fast, but I like that they're not, because they're purposeful. They do their due diligence. They make sure that they're not just reacting to things. They want a fair amount of, like, the market does what the market does, But like when you start having these detention and demurrage, so that's the overage charges for your goods sitting on the yard. And like if you're charging demurrage, but they're not giving you a chance to get your stuff off the yard at the port, that's not fair. And the FMC has come out recently and said you can't charge demurrage if there's no opportunity for them to pick it up, because the whole point of demurrage is to get you to move your stuff. And if you're not letting them move your stuff, then like why are you charging?
Right. Okay. Well, that's interesting. I mean, I agree. I mean, you can't do that.
Right?
I mean,
yeah. I mean, so that's it. You know, the FMC's like, there's been a lot of kind of, I guess, feedback on some of these reports and, you know, saying that there's been a lot of commentary saying that alliances are cartels and that alliances are bad. And, you know, I mean, maybe they're not great. They're still relatively new. I mean, considering, you know, shipping goes back to time itself. You know, it's like alliances were only formed in the past 10, 20 years.
Oh, yeah, it's very young. It's a lot of kinks to be worked out. No,
exactly.
Definitely.
So, you know, and so the FMC regulatory authority over them still has yet to be kind of fully, they still need probably a little bit more authority over it. But, you know, I mean, it's a twofold, right? You don't want the agency, you don't want the federal government to have too much control. But on the other hand, like, if there's no rules around how you're supposed to bill for, okay, so let's just talk about demurrage. So demurrage is essentially when a container's on a ship and it comes off the ship and it sits on the yard, you get probably like 5 to 7 days of free time. And so it's like, all right, you don't have to show up when the ship gets here, but you get a couple days to get everything in order, make sure everything's cleared, you know, paperwork and billing and payments and all that stuff. And then if you don't pick it up in the free time, the next 5 to 7 days likely are going to be just kind of like little dings, like, all right, less than $100, maybe $75 a day. And they're going to say, okay, this is demurrage charge. You're going to get per diem daily demurrage, $75 a day for about 5 days. And so, you know, it's kind of like, look, we're just giving you a little nudge. I'd like you to move your things, you know, don't rush, but like, I'd like you to move your stuff. And then if you don't pick it up, so now you've had a week of free time. You've had a week of maybe like $75 a day. And then you still haven't picked it up. I mean, we're talking 2 weeks, over 2 weeks now. The terminal is going to say, look, we're not a warehouse. We are not your storage yard. This is a transit zone, and we got a lot of ships coming in, and we need that space. So they start to charge $200, $250 a day, which is supposed to be to incentivize you to move your goods. A little bit it's supposed to cover your operational costs, obviously, but $250 a day is not operational costs. That is an incentive to like get your stuff out of here. So that's what's going on. So like sometimes the terminals they don't have appointments open. They don't have, you know, they've closed down that section of the yard. And like, that's not fair. You can't charge somebody to get their stuff off the yard if you're not letting them get the stuff off the yard. And that's what the FMC is kind of diving into and saying, you can't do it that way. And so There's no real rules right now over when you can charge, you know, when you can and when you can't. But the FMC is starting to fine-tune those rules and make it a little bit more clear. And there's no rules on how you invoice. So like you have maybe, let's say you have 2 weeks of demurrage. You get a bill a year later that says $3,000 demurrage. You're like, okay, well, when was this for? Well, it's not on there, but I think it was March. You're like, okay, March when? Like, what do you, like, what container? Oh, I don't have the container number. Well, how do I know this is real? You know? So like, that's what the FMC right now specifically is just trying to like I said, incremental steps, trying to just clean it up without taking too heavy of a hand. They're going over invoicing, minimum billing practices. You have to include a container number. You have to include the date demurrage started, the date demurrage ended, you know, like basic stuff, like, you know, so that they know that you're not lying and just sending out $3,000 bills because people will pay them, you know?
Right. Oh, well, it does surprise me that type of stuff isn't already there. But you know, any, I guess us having this conversation is bringing more light to it, and prayerfully, it's going to do something to push the agenda very fast. Because that doesn't seem very, that seems very just wrong. Actually, it doesn't seem like a good practice. Yeah. Okay. So with the FMC, is there like a safety side of things too, or is this just more so a business conduct?
Yeah, so the FMC really is more kind of like the business, the economics, the kind of overview of the, general ocean transit. So, there's a couple different agencies that are involved in maritime generally. Obviously, the Coast Guard you're probably familiar with. They do a lot of kind of navigational things.
Mm-hmm.
They do safety, they do cybersecurity, which is really kind of a new area of maritime. Well, new area all around, but certainly a new area for maritime. I mean, consider 90% of everything, and I'm talking everything. I'm talking the shoes on your feet to the computer and, in front of you, to your phone, to your, even garlic in your kitchen. 90% of everything goes by ocean transit. And so if it's not domestically made, it's going by ocean transit, and that's 90% of everything. So when you get to numbers like that, it's good to have an agency that's kind of watching over it, and kind of making sure that all is kind of properly business wise taken care of. But also, if you have a port go down, imagine if we had LA Long Beach go down in the middle of that huge 150 ships offshore backup because they went down because of a cyber incident. I mean, that's a big deal, and that's
Right.
90% of everything. I mean, that's like GDP levels. That's arguably partly why we're feeling so much inflation is because of the congestion, because the more it costs to ship goods, the more that good's going to cost.
Right.
And build in gas prices for over the road trucking. I mean, now you're talking like 90% of everything goes by ocean shipping, 100% of everything goes by truck.
Right.
I mean, so that nobody's going to absorb those costs. Those costs get passed on, and that's where we're at. So Coast Guard kind of watches that side of things. You get some environmental agencies involved in it. You get some marine affairs areas and some kind of ocean agencies, but there's a whole bunch that are kind of dabble in different areas.
Okay. Yeah.
I should say the most important sister agency to the Federal Maritime Commission is the Maritime Administration. So the Department of Transportation has a maritime administration. So your listeners are probably most familiar with DOT because
Correct.
of, NHTSA, National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, maybe a little bit Surface Transportation Board, STB, which they do kind of so they're an independent regulatory agency, more on the rail side of things, but technically they do kind of everything surface transport. So
Right.
they really are kind of the equivalent parallel agency to the FMC, but on the domestic side.
The funny thing is, when it comes to domestic transportation, especially when it comes to fleets, owner operators, and things of that nature, it's FMCSA. It's
right?
yeah. So we're close, but that's the safety administration that makes all the regulations that the trucking companies have to adhere to. So it is a lot of organizations that are geared towards safety, which is what kind of inspired the question. FMC for Federal Maritime Commission. I was going to say, well, is it FMCSA? If there's a safety portion of that, kind of similar. But yeah, no, I appreciate you going into that. You did mention LA Long Beach, and all the good stuff that was happening out there when it was a lot of visibility, so much so that President Biden said, "Hey, we're going to make those ports 24/7." That was like October, I believe, of last year. Do you know how that kind of have you been keeping up with that?
Yeah, so I mean, it kind of had mixed results. I don't know if maybe a few of them went 24/7, but I don't know. It's tough because it's like, even if you have everything open, where's all that stuff going to go? The warehouses were full. You can't just solve. We all know it's a supply chain. It's not a supply link. It's not just one piece that matters. You can't just solve one piece and kick the can. And, respectfully to the president, that was just solving one piece. And really, was it solving it? Yeah, great. Okay. We want them working all the time, but people are still people, you can't, I don't know. It just felt like it wasn't connected to the rest of the story. And the rest of the story is the warehouses were so full. We didn't have enough chassis. So, so we talked about, these are boxes on the ship, and they're specifically boxes. They're not boxes with wheels. And, over the road trucking has 53 footers. And those wheels are for the most part attached to that box. The boxes that go on ocean transit are not 53 footers. They're 40 foot and 20 foot, and they don't have any wheels on them. They're made to be clunked around on a vessel. and they get cam locked in. So like they have little holes on each corner, and you lock them in. And at that point, once they get to the shore, they need wheels. And so that's the chassis that they sit on. They sit on these chassis. So not only do we need, like the driver to pull it, we need some wheels to go underneath it to be able to pull it. And so if there's no chassis available, you're out of luck, If there's no driver available, you're out of luck. And now all of a sudden you got a box sitting on a chassis with no driver and nowhere to go, when really that chassis could have been, 2 boxes down, because that driver's here and they're ready to go. So, you start to get into like it's like a logic problem. You start to get into all these like, well, if you have X, Y, and Z, but you put Z and Y together, but X is still sitting there, it's like, I don't like, doesn't make sense, So you get the 24 hours. It was a great idea. And this is where they started building in the port envoy to try to make sense of it all, to try to bring everybody together. And so we had previously John Picari. So the port envoy is a new position, and it's from the president's office, as I understand it. It seems like it's a liaison position. And so what they're trying to do with this position is really connect, have somebody be the kind of ringleader, have somebody be the person that really puts it all together, puts all the pieces together. And so, it was a great idea. It's a great idea in creation. I think John Picari did some good things. But, so he stepped down, and now we have retired General Steve Lyons, who is a former commander of the U.S. Transportation Command, so U.S. Transcom. I think I'm hopeful. I'm not exactly sure what his role will continue to be, because he's not coming from an agency. He's not coming from, he's coming from the administration, and he's kind of there as like a mediator, a liaison, trying to help make sure that everything kind of pulls together well. But, he's from DOD. He's from military, and I love that. And he's from Transportation Command. So, I mean, who better at logistics than the military, So having him come in and have that kind of black and white, that, that military discipline of logistics. I mean, he's from the logistics side, and he's the liaison to, like I said, the administration's supply chain disruptions task force. So they created a whole task force. And so, I'm encouraged by that. I think, if anybody can really kind of dive in there and help, I really like his chances for it.
Okay. Well, that's awesome. I appreciate you bringing that up. I mean, I just pray that, with him, he brings in the folks who are really interested in implementing new technologies, innovations, things that, if we're talking about disruptors being welcome, that completely do away with the paper aspect of things. And so, that's just something that I'm just talking about with you. I don't have to go into it, but I just know that with the way technology is and the way that I'm seeing even domestic truckload and all that kind of stuff go, that's definitely something that's possible. So if it can start earlier, if it can start at the origin and make its way all the way through electronically, I do think that would be a very seamless process, and I think it would speed up a lot of things. So.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand kind of the fear of automation. I mean, we there were some stories recently about some automation that was happening in the ocean world, but the bottom line is you shouldn't have better visibility into where your pizza is than where a company's couple $100,000 or $1 million goods are. And that's the difference. I mean, you can order from Domino's and know when it's going in the oven. I mean, that's where I'd love to see it get on the cargo side, because right now you kind of go into a black hole for a couple weeks or a couple days or however long, like when it's in the ocean somewhere, you don't really know where it is. And maybe they might scan it when they get into, Singapore, or they're moving to a different port or whatever. But there just are kind of these black hole moments that you wait and nobody really can tell you because it's part of a box that's mixed with other goods. And to have that visibility, and I don't need to know what's in there. I don't need to know that Target ordered patio equipment, but if Target were to say, maybe I don't even need to know that it's Target. I just want to know, we have container numbers, but even that isn't consistent across all of the chains of the supply chain. If there was some identifier that we could give to this is box 398, and this box will continue to be called 398 the entire way. It gets packed over in Asia, 398 gets assigned, comes through, gets to the port, still 398, gets over to the gets on a drayage truck, it's still 398. Maybe there's a QR code to it, and so now you know that it's sitting on with a dray, it's being pulled over to the warehouse. That would be great. So okay, I know it's cleared. So if you get some bogus request for an invoice from the port, well, it's not even at the port anymore, or if you get some bogus invoice from the ocean carrier, you're like, well, I know it's not even with you. So there's just so much confusion with where things are that if we can clean that up, it doesn't even need to give out secrets of business and who's doing what. We just need a little more visibility into, where the goods are. Where are they? They shouldn't go into black holes. And unfortunately, that's what happens.
Right.
Should we automate everything? That's a different conversation. This is just all I think is email was scary at first and it's not scary anymore. We can get there. It shouldn't be so cumbersome that you need to be PDFing things and stringing together emails to figure out not only if you have all the right documentation, but if you can even figure out who has control or where your stuff is.
Right. Well, let me ask this. In your day to day, how do organizations like NVOCCs pop up? Do you talk to them directly? Do you have to have any interaction? Do you consult folks who have to use them? Do you consult them?
Yeah, so NVOCCs and freight forwarders, they're certainly some of my clients, as NVOCCs and freight forwarders have some FMC licensing requirements. And so when they do, you're more than welcome to call me and let's figure out, what kind of licenses you need. If you need a license, if you don't, what kind of business you're doing, if you have questions about detention and demurrage, if some of these new rules apply to you. That's where, every person, every business has their own kind of set of questions. And that's where, obviously loving this industry anyways, I just have a passion to find out more. And so when people ask me that question, different questions, I'm like, that's a really good question. I don't know. I've never thought of it that way. Or, fortunately more often it's, yep, I know exactly what you're asking. I'm going to put it into a memo so that you know what it means, or I'm just going to explain it to you. This is how you solve that problem. So, I love working with NVOCCs and freight forwarders because of, that reason, because if they have an ocean piece of it, there's some FMC compliance things that they need to be aware of. And, the FMC, even though it's coming more into the forefront these days, as kind of people are getting more aware of it, their regulations have always, applied. And so compliance with the FMC, whether you're compliant now or you're not compliant, you don't get caught. That's not to say they're never going to catch you because, like I said, they're not super quick. But they are purposeful and they are thorough. And so, they do have a Bureau of Enforcement and they're going through all their records and making sure everybody's doing the right thing, because that's what keeps the ocean cargo movement fair and efficient is, good actors doing good things.
Well, awesome. Okay. I do want to talk more with some NVOCCs on this platform soon, just because I don't know if everybody understands what they do. Do you have a good understanding of what an NVOCC is and what they do?
Yeah. So you have freight forwarders and you have NVOCC. So, essentially, NVOCC, a non-vessel operating common carrier. So, it's generally freight forwarders and NVO. So, all right, let's back it up. Ocean transportation intermediaries is what a freight forwarder and an NVOCC are. So they are ocean transportation intermediaries. They don't own the vessel, and they're not the owner of the goods. They're the intermediary. I've heard it described as they're the travel agent. And so they're helping you to book your cargo, to move your cargo, to figure out, they're kind of the insiders and they know the game. And so they know where to book it and who to book it. And, they can get your rates and they can do all that stuff. And so, that's their role in the industry there.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's interesting because a lot of people don't understand that, or let me take a step back, because this is the part that I really wanted to talk about, to see if there was any type of agreements between NVOCCs and maybe organizations like Project 44, where the NVOCC, the people who have reserved the space on that tanker and they're essentially brokering out those different spaces for containers that are containing goods, obviously. Could that NVOCC communicate directly with Project 44 to like give better, visibility to which company actually has a container on that, which company actually is utilizing a container, and, maybe some way of, utilizing their their supreme technology in the visibility space, because you said that there were some blackouts, some black holes in that chain of origin to destination. But I know that Project 44 is a leader in that space, so I'm wondering like how we could actually get away from, or kind of like make a more robust system so that they don't exist in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, so, I think it's always I think ocean transportation intermediaries are always going to be kind of important, because it's, you might maybe not always need to transport your goods, but you're going to need to be able to go to the local, I mean, not this, but the local UPS. I mean, what if you couldn't go to the local UPS, but you had to source, a truck to move all your stuff? I mean, so that's kind of the general, I mean, your audience knows that. So, I mean, so visibility in the supply chain, visibility including ocean, there's a bunch of different stuff happening here. And I think it's yet to be kind of determined where the parameters, where the guardrails are going to end up here for the FMC. They've been talking about freight market platforms, and, it's part of their discussion. They have a Maritime Transportation Data Initiative. So the MTDI is being led by one of the commissioners. So the Federal Maritime Commission has 5 commissioners. There's a chairman, and then there's 4 regular commissioners. And so politically, it's 3 of one party, 2 of the other. And so usually the party in power of the presidency has the party, majority of the agency. And so one of those commissioners, Commissioner Carl Bensel, has been hosting these weekly meetings through basically December through April about transportation and transportation data, and how visibility can come into the world of supply chain and the ocean supply chain, and also how do we regulate it? And like I said, they don't like to have a heavy hand, but they do want to make sure that it stays fair. I like to think that the FMC provides guardrails, but not rigid, like kind of driving lines, if that makes sense. They want to make sure you're not going off the road, but they still want to have winners and losers. And so they've been really diving into the Transportation Data Initiative, looking at, well, what information do we know already? What's out there? Who knows what? And who's being protective about it? Or maybe not even protective. Who knows what? And who needs to know what? And so every week they would have a different category. They might have ocean carriers. They might have NVOCCs. They might have government agencies. They might have, Project 44. They might have some sort of a tech company come in, visibility-facing tech company. And so they all said kind of, what do you know and what do you need to know? And so that's what Commissioner Bensel is trying to do, is combo those. Figure out, okay, well, this company needed piece of information B, C, and D, and the other company had X, Y, Z. They need what each other has. Let's pair them together. So I think, while they're still kind of working out the kinks here, I think this is kind of a really, really cool initiative that Commissioner Bensel's been doing, because it's really trying to connect the dots of what we already know. It's not necessarily people being protective with their information. It's just not really knowing where to get it from. And so, as Project 44 and some of the Freightos, some of these other kind of tech-sided things are coming about, I think that there's a space for them to enter in, and the FMC is going to be watching just to make sure that they're not taking advantage. And that's not to imply that anybody is, but you want all businesses to be able to do well and to thrive. And likewise, if they're not doing well, that's part of the circle of life, if you will, of business. But, I think the FMC is kind of keeping a watch on it to see, is this something that they should be regulating? Is this something that they need to be more regulatory over? I think that this is a really interesting space.
Okay. So with the FMC, we've been talking about it. Do you feel like they have the oversight for, some of those newer things that just took place, namely the Hyundai autonomous vessel that recently did the had their own long pilgrimage of the auto. Basically it was unmanned. Men were up there, folks were on it, but it was basically being guided by itself. Is that something that the FMC would be regulating?
Yeah, so not really. So that would actually be more likely to be Coast Guard regulated. And
Okay.
actually, on the international sense, that would be the International Maritime Organization, the IMO. So the IMO is kind of the International Maritime Safety and Operations, agency. So we're all kind of familiar with the UN, the United Nations, as being kind of this. It's not a regulating body necessarily of the world, but it's kind of like the international type of organization. The IMO is similar to that, but it's kind of for the purpose of safety and operations. One of the major things that the IMO is in charge of is safety of life at sea, SOLAS, and that came about after the Titanic. So, they've been doing some things that kind of make sense in that space. But so the autonomous vessels are interesting because when you first think about it, you're just imagining basically like remote controlled vessels out there on the ocean. And like, if you've ever seen a container ship or this was an LNG vessel, if you've ever seen any of these huge ships out there, like they're not small, they're huge. And you can't even, imagine being on a cruise ship and being like, that one has no driver.
Right.
I don't think we're going to get to that point. I don't think we're going to have like driverless vessels out there. But then again, I guess I didn't really think we'd get driverless cars, but I don't think we have fully driverless cars. You still have to be there. It's just that like, autopilot is available. And I think that's the way that we're moving. In the middle of the ocean, when you have your radar on and nobody's around, if you put on autopilot, but you still have somebody standing there next to the helm, okay, I think that makes some sense. Or the same way that you might, if you're on your own boat or whatever, and you have your GPS up and it tells you, or Google Maps, it tells you the most direct way to get there. And now you're going to have some fuel efficiency because you didn't take that extra right turn that like you've always historically took. But now that you did Google Maps, you saw it actually, there's a faster route. I think that that's what we're going to see. Basically the world oceans is like, we went from not really having Google Maps to having Google Maps through this autonomous platform or software. I think that's where we're going to see some benefit. Are we going to see self-driving vessels? No. Are we going to maybe see reduced mariners on board? Maybe, because, we also had a mariner crunch. We had a mariner crisis during COVID that didn't get as much attention as it deserved. We had people on vessels 6 months, 9 months, a year. They couldn't get off because they either were being quarantined or they couldn't get off in ports to hop on planes to fly home because the world had shut down. They were stuck. They were basically stuck on these vessels for extremely too long. And that became a humanitarian crisis that really kind of went under the radar.
Wow. Yeah. Man, I'm just happy that we're able to bring some attention to it right now because Jesus, I couldn't imagine. I could not imagine at all.
Everybody was stuck at home, but what about the people that were stuck on the vessels?
Right.
That's the piece of it, because somebody's got to be driving those ships. And
somebody, definitely. I never thought about it in that capacity. I've even, in my time being abroad, I've met merchant Marines, so I know the folks that used to be on the ships, and I never considered them, during any of this time. So I appreciate you bringing some attention to that.
Yeah, that's it. So sometimes their rotations are out there on vessel for maybe 3 months, and so, okay, you sign up for 3 months, a pandemic ensues, and nobody's letting your ship into port.
Right.
They're afraid of what's going on board, and there was no testing, there was no anything. And vaccines, same thing. You're a mariner, you're not going to be at the same port 2 to 3 weeks later to get your second shot. How can you be fully vaxxed if you can't even go back to the same place 2 to 3 weeks later? Whatever, I forget what the rules were. What you get one Moderna shot and 3 weeks later you had to come back and get your second shot for the first round. So you couldn't do that. And do you take it on the vessel and try to maintain it? And if you have a certain number of people, then you have a doctor on board, but under a certain number you don't. And so most of them really don't. So how do you solve that? And those were the real world scenarios. So you're unvaxxed, so you can't come into port, but you need to go to port to get your vax. How do you it was pretty messed up for a while.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see it, and I'm still on the emotional side of things because I remember being in Afghanistan, and I wasn't, I was there working a job, but I just know how I was feeling, counting down the days
Mm-hmm.
that it was going to be before I was able to get on that plane and come back home, and meeting merchant marines who were also in that situation. And to be told that you can't
Mm-hmm.
go home, you got to stay in this situation that is probably awful in the first place.
Mm-hmm. And they
Yeah,
can't
I'm
tell you
still
when.
there.
They
So
can't tell you how long.
yeah, without any
Mm-hmm.
real answers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I just yeah, my heart goes out to those folks right now.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Thank you for your service, by the way. That's so awesome.
oh no. See, here's the thing. I was working a job.
Oh, okay.
I was working a job.
Well, thank you for working the job. It's so important, I'm sure.
I have to be sure that I tell, but I
Yep.
was out there with folks who were in the military, like,
Mm-hmm.
and, we're going off on a tangent now, but before I went to Afghanistan, I was a person that, I kind of understood how people get mad at each other, get in fight and all that kind of good stuff. But after seeing what our servicemen and women had to do to protect us, and them always being with arms and having to go out outside of the perimeter of where I was, and I just knew the type of things that they were going through. I had a different respect for just
Mm-hmm.
people as a whole. I'm a completely different person now.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm
Mm-hmm.
happy with my experience there. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
shaped me to be a more compassionate person. But yeah, no. I saw what they were doing, and I don't need to go back to Afghanistan. I'll just say that. I don't need to go back to Afghanistan. So yeah, but that's that. So with you there's a service that you offer, with the I'm a position it like this. When it comes to new entrants into the trucking industry, they have to pass a safety audit that is conducted by the FMCSA. All right. Now, I know that you have the ability to kind of coach people through a mock audit when it comes to the Federal Maritime Commission, but what does that really look like?
Yeah, I mean it's so situationally specific, and I'm sure that kind of relays on the transport or on the surface transport side of things too. It's so specific to like, well, what are you trying to do? What goods are you trying to move? What do you have experience? They have qualified individuals that are required, for certain different levels. Are you based in the U.S.? Are you based foreign? There's a whole slew. So really, I mean, it's kind of taking all of those different variables, taking all those different factors and helping people understand, well, what are you supposed to be doing? What are you, who do you need to kind of be reporting to? What information are you supposed to be filing? Are you doing it correctly? That sort of thing. And really sometimes it's not even as granular as like licensing, but like it's, so you're a port and you have to create your tariff. And so your tariff is your price list. And so it's, am I doing this right? Is this, compliant with what the FMC wants to do or wants to see? And then getting back to detention and demurrage, so that port, they have to charge demurrage because otherwise people just leave their stuff on the yard all the time. But it's like, are you gut checking that? Do you have like a rationale for why you do demurrage for the amount of money that you do? Can you kind of justify how long you have given these vessels or these shippers that have left their goods there? And then do you have a dispute mechanism? So like if somebody's like, look, for X number of reasons, like I couldn't make it because my, I don't know, let's just say the license, they were under review for it was a I don't know, a fish company or a shellfish company or something. And for whatever reason, they got caught up in an international trade dispute. And so they weren't allowed to go get the box, but it sat there and it sat there and it sat there. And now here you have, frozen shellfish sitting in this refrigerated container box on the yard. It's been there for, forever. It feels like it's been there for a month and a half, and you're getting up to your like expiration date. I'll tell you, that port does not want that shellfish. Like, they don't want it. They don't want it to go bad. They want the customer to be able to pick it up. And so what happens is sometimes ports or terminals will have a dispute mechanism. So if you are like, I need to email so-and-so and I need to tell them this is what happened, I'm so sorry, you might be able to get your demurrage reduced. And that's kind of, is there a fairness factor? Is there a way that that owner of the goods can like get the number down? Because you hit a point where it costs more to release that container from jail than it does for the goods inside the container. So at that point, the port or the terminal, whomever, is dealing with abandonment. And so if you have that shipper just say, I'm just going to write it off, this is a loss. Now you're stuck with a refrigerated container full of shellfish that's about to go bad. I'll tell you, no port wants to deal with that. Like, they don't want to get thrown into the shellfish world, with 2 weeks turnaround time. They want to work with, or I'd like to think that they'd want to work with, that beneficial cargo owner, that owner of the goods, that shipper, to get that stuff moving. And so that's where I like to come in and kind of help, is like, let's think through this. Do you have, if the FMC were to come ask you questions, do you have some good reasoning? Do you have some good rationale? And kind of gut checking it. Like, well, so they asked me, Lauren, what types of things are they looking for? Well, I can't tell you exactly, but in general, here's what they look for. They look for, like I said, do you have some sort of mechanism for dispute if somebody has a problem? Or do you have, some sort of fairness factor? And that's really it. It comes down to the fair and efficient movement of goods. And that's really how the FMC works. And so it's kind of a gut check back. Is this fair? Does this increase efficiency?
Right. Well, I love it, man. I definitely love it. I feel as though I've gotten to look behind the veil, which is maritime, and how transportation and the things that I have going on kind of intersect with, what you have going on. And, I did want to just say thank you. I wanted to see if anyone that was listening had any questions. If you do, go ahead and raise your hand. But, Lauren, I did just want to say thank you very much for your time, man.
Thank you. This was so fun. This was great. I really enjoyed chatting with you. I'd love to be back. I think this was really fun. And certainly I hope your audience enjoyed it. It looked like we got a good couple chats in the comments section. So that's great.
Yeah, no doubt. I think it's going to be very informative, especially even on the replay when people are listening to it after the fact. I enjoyed the conversation. I know that you are very passionate about this industry, and I'm sure that as, I grow in my global supply chain, that I'll be interested in bringing it back up so that we can talk about some new policies, new regulations that are surrounding automation, autonomous, vessels, and, maybe some of the ways in which they're going to, with that new leadership, going to more, streamline what that process really looks like. So, definitely. Yeah, so I'll definitely have you back as the subject matter expert for that. And, I don't know if I have any questions, so I'm just going to go ahead and turn off the hand raising. But Lauren, is there anything that you wanted to say to close out the room?
No, I mean, that's it. I really enjoyed chatting today. I'm all about trying to break down those silos. So, if I can be of service, if, like I said, I got the two companies because not everybody has a legal question, and sometimes you just want to know more. So, if you want a little business coaching that's non-legal, or, follow my, go to themaritimeprofessor.com. That's where I'm going to be pulling all of my e-content learning. It's going to be kind of like courses, and you can pick and choose and mix and match. And I'll have the essential guide as kind of the 101 briefer mini course. But, if you want to learn more about, maybe you want to learn more about the alliances, I'm going to create a course that has a more in-depth look at the alliances. And, maybe you're just somebody who's in logistics and you just want to know more. You want to be more educated. You want to be in your business meetings and kind of being able to chat. And, if they talk about alliances, they talk about the different ocean carriers, you know what they're talking about. And, that's what I want to provide, is a little bit more clarity, because, we've talked about this before. You just got to translate it. Like, sometimes it's so foreign. We're all talking about the same thing, but there's 5 different ways to say it. Nobody wins if you do that, So, like, that's what I want to do, is try to find those parallels, try to bring it all together, try to have the ocean people care about what the drayage people are doing, which cares about what the warehouse is doing. We all are consumers at some point. So like, we all benefit from goods moving, and we all benefit from fair, efficient movement of goods, because that keeps the prices low. And, until we get some control over this congestion and some of these supply chain problems and equipment and all that, and I think it's starting to level out, we're just going to keep having these elevated prices, at least in part, not totally, but in part because of the congestion problems. So, but, if anybody has any legal questions or non-legal questions, or, actually I'm recruiting for I'm recruiting on behalf of a port, a southern inland port. So if anybody's interested in a director of operations position, reach out to me. I do a little bit of executive recruiting, and that's part of the Maritime Professor. But if nothing else, feel free to casually follow me on Fridays at 1 p.m. It's on my LinkedIn, streams out to my YouTube, streams out to my Twitter. YouTube is by Land and by Sea. Twitter is the Maritime Prof. I'd love to have you join. I just really enjoy conversations and engaging with people and keeping that conversation going. So no question is too small. No question is, well, sometimes questions are too big, but you know what? Let's break it apart. Let's dive into it. I love this industry, and I just want to share that with people.
Definitely. Well, again, I appreciate you for joining us today. And everybody, thank you for the continued support. I truly appreciate it. Check us out on Monday. We are going to be doing the session with Freight Waves, just like every other Monday at 7:30 a.m. It is going to be utilizing Sonar, which is their trucking tool. Well, it's not a trucking tool. It's their analytics tool that kind of points out the areas where we want to position our trucks so that we're able to take advantage of the best rates and avoid the areas that are slumping. They call them loose markets. And then next week, I am going to be able to provide a lot of dispatch information because we're going to be bringing on Ashley Baker. And shout out to Desi. I appreciate you, brothers, for that recommendation. So yeah, I'll just see you guys next week. And if there's anything I can do for you in the meantime, please just feel free to reach out to me. All right. God bless y'all. Have a good one, Lauren.
Thanks, Jory. Thanks so much.
No doubt.